Hi there, Tim.
Hi, Tim.
Good evening. Hello, everyone.
Hi. So, excuse me. It's 5 o'clock and we do have a quorum, so I'm going to go ahead and get started so that the sooner we start, the sooner we can get on with our Fridays. So I'm calling the Amherst School Committee to order at 5 o'clock. And excuse me, since we are remote, we're going to do a roll call attendance. Jennifer is here. Deb?
Present.
Sarah?
Here.
Irv? Irv, if you said here, I didn't hear you because you're on mute. Are you able to unmute?
Maybe he stepped
away.
away.
I'm here.
Great, thank you. Okay, so we have one agenda item, which is a presentation from Ammon Consulting on the boundaries for the two elementary schools. And we have Tim Ammon here. Tim, are you able to share screen?
I believe I can.
Okay.
Just make sure that I can share the one that I need to. Let me just
Oh, you know what? Actually, while you're doing that, I'm just going to check in with Amherst Media to make sure that we're streaming. Hang on one second. Okay, I did get confirmation that we're live, so we're good. Go ahead.
Okay.
If you're able to.
And I can, let me just make sure I picked the right screen here. Okay. Hopefully you all can see that.
Yes.
Okay, great. Am I good? Should I start?
Yeah, go right ahead.
Great. Thank you. And thank you, everybody. I very much appreciate, obviously, the commitment for the time this evening and the opportunity to provide you with the update on where we've been and what we've been working on. There will be a couple of pieces here that we want to talk about. We want to talk about, obviously, the update to the enrollment projections and to the boundary analysis. What I won't do tonight that we had done previously is to spend a lot of time talking about process because we have done that already. But obviously, if there are questions about how we get to a particular point, just stop me and obviously I'll be happy to answer it. When we're moving through this, from the perspective of the, oh, sorry, there we go. Trying to get all my buttons aligned here. So since we met in September, there's been several things that have occurred. The first was, given the time frame between when we had initially collected the student data and where we were, we had gathered actually an update to the student file sometime around September 25th or so, representing what we thought was sort of a stabilization of the enrollment at that point in time. And we use that for two purposes. We use that to update our analysis of the characteristics of any proposed boundary. And what we also did, given a suggestion from the previous meeting, was to carry out the enrollment projections beyond a 5-year period through a 10-year period. We'll talk a little bit about that here in a minute, but that allowed us to carry projections through 2036, I think it is. And so, but the base year that we're using now became the base year of the current school year. In addition, one of the things that was pointed out and that we were actually provided with was what I have referred to throughout as just the island boundaries within the Crocker area, where there are students who are being transferred over to or transitioned over to Fort River and Wildwood currently. And so we brought those areas into the map in order to do two things, to assess some of the counts within each of the individual areas, and then to specifically measure what changes may have occurred from a demographic perspective as we started to think about what to do with those island areas. Because I think, as we had mentioned the last time, our inclination and our efforts when we do these is to not have island boundaries due to the associated costs of both transportation and the long-term management, the administrative management of those boundaries over time. So to the degree that we can not have them, we make an effort to do that. And And so it was useful to be able to measure kind of current versus projected if we were able to eliminate those. In addition, based on some of the feedback, certainly that we heard both in the public session and in some of the comments that we provided after, were provided to us after, we did revise the initial draft boundaries that we had proposed, consistent with some of the questions around particular areas where there were a limited number of students, but it would have resulted in a transition. So was it possible to move those back in and not have any negative impact either on capacity utilization or on school characteristics? So we've made some changes to that as well. Once we had those changes in place, we were fortunate enough to gather some additional information from the district that allowed us to do some demographic analyses that you'll see within the contents of the presentation on the new proposed boundaries, so that we can see what differences might exist between the two schools were they to use the boundaries that have are being proposed here this evening. And then lastly, actually just this week, we had another group meeting with the principals to gather some of their feedback related to questions on just process and questions about thinking in terms of impacts on specific schools and impacts on specific programs about any boundary changes. Sarah, happy to take a question.
Thank you. Just clarification on bullet 3.
Yes.
I understand revising the draft boundaries. I don't understand what you mean if you are saying you revise the baseline facility use, because it is what it is, or because you updated by a year, is it?
Well, so from part of the baseline facility use update was just, we got some clarification on some room counts and so forth. There, if you remember, we had some questions about what we were calling designated, we were describing as designated special needs rooms, where really they were more programs rather than specifically for self-contained special needs programs. So from our perspective, we did some changes to the nomenclature. The count of those rooms in Crocker Farms, for example, stayed the same, but the way we have described them through the analysis has changed some.
Does that mean that that only affects the number of surplus rooms?
It does, and actually in that instance, because they are still separated and designated for a function other than a general ed classroom, it doesn't actually affect that, because they still remain outside the boundary of the analysis.
Okay, thank you.
Sure. Okay, and so given that, first thing we want to do is just take a look at where the projections fell out, because I think there's a couple of notable items just that influence things as we go forward. What you see here is a 3-part summary, which addresses what the 24-25 actual counts were that we had at the time. And included in that is, based on those numbers, what our initial 25-26 projection was. And then finally, where the 25-26 actual came in at from September. And I think there's just several things just to point out as we go forward. The first is that the 24-25 actual and initial projection actually ran pretty close together. While we were different grade to grade, in the aggregate, we were pretty similar. But what was more interesting and certainly is actually more consequential for purposes of the analysis is the way that the count of students came in on an actual basis for 25-26 across the K-5 grades. That reduction of 33 students is a pretty notable reduction. It's around 4% of the total. And so that was unexpected, certainly from our side. And so I don't exactly know why that may be the case, but these are the counts that we had. And so one of the things that it causes us to do when we see swings like this, and when we look at some of the history on the projection slide next, we'll see this isn't the first time that there have been sort of notable swings like this in the actuals. It does make us think a little bit more about edge cases. So if we are running up against a very tight border then what we need to to think about is the degree to which we are either overweighting or discounting a significant drop like this that we see in the enrollment. And so with that, again, you can see just how they laid out. Just before we get to the questions, the challenges around kindergarten are always pretty particular. Kindergarten gets projected off of birth rates and gets adjusted based off of PK enrollment and so forth, but they can be pretty tricky to get right and to get spot on. So we do generally see a little bit of a larger difference at the kindergarten level than we do in some of the outgrades when we're looking at this sort of cohort survival approach. So that wasn't completely unexpected, but certainly I think the overall drop was somewhat surprising. Deb, I think you had the first question.
Yeah, so just one quick question. When you say the September 25th actuals, that is you did some sort of real-time
Yes.
measurement of the current students?
We pulled it from the existing student information system and had the file sent to us. Yeah.
And then for the swing data that you're talking about, do you have any insight into like the grades that they, no, I guess it's not the grades, the buildings, the current enrollment buildings on where they're from?
I don't know that off the top of my head, but certainly we can look into that for sure.
Yeah, right now we have a little bit of instability in the enrollment in one of our buildings, and I'm just think it would be good to keep in mind that those students might come back when we've resolved it.
Yeah, and we can certainly trace back. I mean, we do have the history by building, so we can certainly trace back and look at that. And I'll provide information back to Shannon and Dr. Z that she can share with you all once, early part of next week.
Thank you.
Certainly. Sarah.
Yeah, similar to Deb's second point, I think it is likely that the cohort loss over time is not due to families moving away, is they're choosing other schools. And I really hope that we have room in our schools for them to come back, because we would love them to come back. So I don't want us to make a plan that's so tight that we can't accommodate the majority of these students, because I think they may, unless I misunderstand, you're based on school enrollment, not on residential data. So if they're not in the school, you're not counting them, but they may still be living in our district, and we need to be able to accommodate them if they return.
And I'm sorry, Bridget, before I get to your question, I'll just if I could address that. We have looked at information on transfers that the district also provided us as part of this. So we are looking at that and trying to understand from a capacity perspective, like how much of this could we manage, and that this also emerged as a consequence of one of the comments from the previous meeting where we had addressed the issues around charter schools and some of that as well. So that is in the mix here. However, from a projection standpoint, the projections are based on students who are enrolled in the district schools. Bridget, sorry.
Yeah, no problem at all. Thank you for putting all this together. I have a question I don't know if you know the answer to, but you say that there's 17 general ed classrooms at Crocker Farm, which if we were estimating like 20 students a classroom, that would be 340. So I went back and looked at the sort of data, and Crocker Farm was built for 450 students. We see 10 years ago, there were 422. Right now there's 353. So why are we estimating, do you know, for 300 students at Crocker Farm?
Yeah, so actually that's a terrific question. Can I do that when we get to the facility piece? Can I address that when we get to the facilities piece? Yeah, for sure. But I will absolutely make a note to do that.
The 300 doesn't include the preschool.
Correct. That's part of it, right? Yeah. Okay. Deb.
Can you define transfers just so I understand what you mean by
I'm sorry, school choice. Yeah, school choice.
in or out or just
So we looked at both. We look at both in and out. So I think as we spoke about last time, school choice that is into the district is included because we've accepted those students and we're retaining them. That was an issue that we addressed the last time. School choice out are students that we have looked at as possible population, but they are not addressed in the enrollment projections or any of that because they are not in the schools.
and when you say choice out, you mean I have a certain interpretation of that. I interpret that as choiced out to other public school districts, but not to charter. You probably mean both,
I have, yeah, with the numbers that we've looked at are both.
right?
So they have included other choice out to public schools and choice out to the charters.
And private schools, perhaps? Excuse me.
I don't have that information, so I don't know about private schools.
So just those two categories.
Yeah.
And then when you say we're retaining students, is that because right now or soon we will need to be voting on whether or not to accept choice students into the district overall. So when you say those include transfers, you mean, are you projecting to have any additional transfers, or are these just the current enrollments?
Just the current.
Okay,
Just
thank
the current.
Yeah,
Yep.
thank you.
Yep. Okay. And so as we look just generally at an update to the enrollment projections, this is similar to what we had presented previously. We had carried it initially through 2029-30. Given the fact that we had new additional school year 25-26 information on, we would have updated it to 2030-31, but as a consequence of some of the conversations the last time, we carried it out. I'm going to just start at the bottom of the bullets just because I think it's a notable thing. Years 6 to 10 have a decidedly different degree of uncertainty around them than years 1 to 5. So just as we're thinking about this, I just want to make sure that we point that out. In addition, what we see when we look at a new baseline of the current year, if you remember the last time we met, we had a peak of approximately 879-ish students over the first 5-year period. That's obviously dropped substantially as a consequence of two things. The first is as we start to carry out births, because we don't know what the birth rate is in some of these years, the way that gets addressed is either through the average or the median of the previous 5 years. Here we have used the average. But when we look, if you just look up and down the birth column, what we end up seeing is a declining birth rate. And so a consequence of a declining birth rate is, not surprisingly, smaller kindergarten classes, which generally works its way through the system as declines in enrollment if we don't have some mechanism that is supplementing the cohort basically to grow the size of the cohort, right? So that's part of what we see here. In addition, one of the things to note is in looking in the actuals, which are in the white, in many of the instances, I think actually most, when we look at the outgoing 5th grade and the incoming kindergarten, if the incoming kindergarten is smaller than the outgoing 5th grade, it's the same effect as essentially declines in enrollment, right? And so that is one mechanism to understand the degree to which we either might be gaining capacity or losing capacity within a given school. So just as kind of a general lay of the land on the table, that's we see that throughout, and just as we noted as well, the decline this year is notable, but we do see several of the other years where we've got sort of year-over-year fluctuations that are pretty significant as well. So as we are thinking about how to address what's available from a capacity perspective and not, I mean, from the way that we're thinking about this, part of this is we know that given this fluctuations, it's probably going to be necessary for us to be a little bit more judicious about how we think about adjusting up on the total number of students, given that, and if the suppositions around attracting students back to the district with new school and everything else are true, then what is projected in here would be an underrepresentation. And so we'll keep that in mind as we're talking about what available capacity looks like. Now, it's also important to note, I don't think it's a 50% underrepresentation, and I don't think it's a 30% overrepresentation. So, as we're building the confidence intervals around it, I think we just need to be sensible about how we're thinking about that. Sarah, I'll address your question first because I think it came at the beginning, and then we can just walk through some of the bullets.
Oh, I guess I have another question. I don't even remember my previous. I thought you answered my previous question.
Oh, okay.
Okay, but this one is briefly. These are births in Amherst, I assume.
Correct.
And
That's
how
right.
are you modeling those as a?
We are taking them from vital statistics data from the state. So they give you by town births within the town. And those values are being used as for
But
births.
what trend? I mean, but on what basis are the projections?
Oh, I'm sorry. So a 2019 birth value is actually births from 2014 because it's 5 years, right? So
That's year of enrollment, not year of birth.
correct. Right. So 2019 is the school year, 1920 school year. So kindergartners in the 2019 school year would have been 2014 births, right? Because it'd be 5 years old. So that's the way this carries out. So the birth year is 5 years prior to the school year.
So you're saying in 2019, 144 children could have enrolled, but only 128 did.
Correct. Right. And that's how the cohort works, right? The cohort works, so what we would end up with there, obviously, is you end up with the start of a decline in the enrollment because it's below 1. I think as we talked about last time, right, anything below 1 is declining enrollment, anything above 1 is increasing enrollment, and anything at 1 is stable.
Right. So in 2030, we have projected more students enrolling than were born. So
Correct.
these are in-migrating families?
Exactly. It would be either more than likely it's in-migrating families, or it's some element of some element of just the way the break occurs for the way the births are counted.
I mean, like fall versus spring?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, thank you.
So, Deb, should I go through the questions first, through the points first, and then we can answer your question? Okay, great. Again, so as we talked about, right, about a 4% reduction in the number of students in actual has an impact on the projections going out. When we look at peak year, which is one of the things that we've talked about, right, because we have to size and think about the size of the capacity for what some of the peak year components are. That's about a 60 student difference, but we do have this fluctuation. And I think, as I mentioned, the grade 5 counts versus the kindergarten counts really matter in terms of thinking about how this is going to work its way through the system over time. And so what the way that we would use this, so there's actually sort of some good news about this potentially, is that when you look at it, what it actually means is there's now more capacity in the school than we thought there otherwise might have been, right? And so that gives us a chance to think about the constraints that we were talking about the last time are eased a little bit as a result of this. I do think from a prudence perspective, we had that sort of threshold conversation around what was going to happen in 2031 the last time. But I do think from a prudence perspective, thinking through 2031 is really about as far as we should be projecting this out. And the rest of it should be thought of as kind of a constellation that we might navigate by rather than a compass. Deb, did I address your question, or is it still out there? It's just on mute. It's on mute.
You're on mute, Deb.
Thank you. You addressed one of them.
Okay.
Should I?
Yeah, if you have another. Yeah, sure. Yeah, before we move
Can
on.
you define for me, because confidence intervals is not, I know what error bars are.
Yeah. So again, if we're thinking sort of plus or minus 5% on the numbers, to be honest, the cohort survival is usually within like a couple of percent. But we've got really unusual sort of fluctuations here. So that actually difference is a little bit harder to dial in. And it doesn't really matter what method you use, right? I mean, if you start to even do some of the regressions on this and so forth, like the variability in the data still causes some of the same problems. It just causes it in different ways. So again, I think this is an aspect of where the art and science of this kind of come together in terms of how you think about historically what has happened and from a projection standpoint, what is going to happen, and how do we try to moderate those things when we're making decisions about, the appropriateness of any kind of boundary scenario.
Well, I really appreciate going further out, because I know it, as you said before, it gets fuzzier, but that peak didn't look like a peak to me. The last time it looked like pointing up that direction.
Yeah.
It's great to see that it's stabilized. And you said the modeling doesn't really matter. Do you mean like the attrition model, and then like who's coming in and who's coming out? And then
No. I'm talking more about like the projection model. So like if you use cohort, or if you use regression, or if you use some kind of a different kind of model.
Okay.
It doesn't matter very much in terms of where the results end up. Now, purposefully, we use cohort because cohort is an element required by the state for the building projects and so forth. So it's the right methodology to use, but in order to just bounce the results off something else, there are different ways to look at it. And so that's one of the things that we do as part of the process.
Great, thank you.
Okay, so leaving the projections here for the time being, we do get into the enrollment and the boundary analysis components. Again, we'll just generate some conversation about the changes in student counts. For purposes of the models, and Bridget, this is where I'll come back to your question. Thank you. We have retained the previous values that we were using in order to determine two things. The first is what the target class sizes were. And the second was, for all intents and purposes, the room counts that we had coupled with the rooms that have been set aside, right? So both the general ed side and the specialized room assignments. The capacities provided, and again, these capacities are not ours, they are of yours. And so there's certainly a conversation that can be had about how do we get from X to Y. But to your question, Bridget, one of the things that we try to point out is the physical capacity of the building, its occupancy capacity, is actually different than its student capacity based on the enrollments and the decisions around class size, right? Because depending on if everything worked perfectly and all the breaks were exactly the right way, we might get to the full capacity of the building, but that usually doesn't happen, right? Because what we end up with is, instead of, if for the sake of argument, because the math is easy, we've assumed an average of 20 students in a class, and we have 61, right? We end up with an additional kid. So one of two things happens. We either ignore the class size target value and we start with 3 classes, or we use the class size target value and we end up with 4 sections of whatever 4 into 60 is, 50.
15 and one of 60.
Yeah, 15 and change, 15 in a rounding error, right? And so that's one of the reasons why I think occupancy capacity has to be thought about differently than actual functional capacity based on, the grade counts. So I think that sort of gets at a portion of the way that your question was. Now, the room counts is certainly, that's a value that again, you all have designed for us in terms of what's available. In looking at the floor plans of the schools and so forth, one of the things that room counts typically take into some consideration is requirements relative to state demands around, the physical space actually required. requirements around programmatic things that are occurring in the school. So there can be a bunch of different things that even if there are 60 rooms in the building, there might only be 17 of them that are available for classrooms because of just the physical size of it, right? And so from the perspective of the way we have approached this analysis, the information provided to us gave us those total gen ed available classrooms that we tried to fill based on those target class sizes. So I don't know if that fully answers everything in your question, but and if it doesn't, just let me know and I'll try to figure out how to address the rest of it. Okay. So with that, that was our starting point, right? Our revised starting point was the new student the new student file and the enrollment projections and the information around class size targets and room capacity at each of the buildings. And so doing that, one of the things that we did is, again, adjust, and you all have seen this before, but it can get a little confusing, so I'll just run through this very quickly. This is the revision from the last time, and I'll try to highlight a couple of areas that we had the revision in. The peach area represents what we are still calling the new school. I'll change that as soon as we have something better to call it. But the peach area is the new school. The purple area is for Crocker Farm. Within Crocker Farm, just to highlight where we were doing it, the two, the pink and the pinkish and the bluish area within Crocker Farm are those existing island boundaries. That just to not bury the lead, we have actually absorbed into the broader Crocker Farm boundary for the new boundaries. We had a couple of conversations the last time about a particular bump out area that is, let's see, I think I can pull this off without sort of screwing up the whole works here. That was in and around here, where there were approximately 10 students that just, it didn't seem to make a lot of sense to people why we were moving that area. So we didn't, we moved it back, and we were able to do that without having a hugely negative impact on anything. And as a consequence, and some of that is as a consequence of the availability of additional space given given the changes in enrollment. In addition, we had looked at some other areas as a result of some of the conversations up in and around here to see if there was something that we should think about. And as we started to look at those areas and as we started to think about moving them, they actually provided imbalances in the schools that we were uncomfortable with when we started to look at kind of net difference. So what we ended up doing is keeping that retention, which was a move from which is currently Crocker Farm over to the new school, right? Because if we remember the boundaries over here, obviously is the existing Fort River boundary. Up here is the existing Wildwood boundary. And then down here, right, this is the portion of Crocker Farm being transitioned. So in doing these, all of the results that we present going forward are include these changes. They include the area coming back into Crocker Farms. They include the absorption of the two islands into Crocker Farm. They include the transition out of the northern part of the Crocker Farm boundary over to the new school. And there are a couple of other tweaks that we did based on some just zooming in a little bit closer to the streets and making sure we had kids on right sides of the streets that moved a few kids, but nobody that was particularly consequential with those kinds of changes. I think, Deb, I think you may have been first. Sorry, it's on mute.
Sorry. Two questions. One being the bump out areas. It looks to me, and I don't know why it's so hard to tell from the maps, but it looks to me like the first one you mentioned is the Valley View area, and then the second one's going to be like that Amity Street area. Is that, or do I need to get out my map?
Well, so in one of the, and I actually should have mentioned this at the beginning, one of the things that we will do at the conclusion of this is send you a very detailed map that it's a PDF of the boundaries where you can blow them up and actually see the streets and you can see everything that's included in there.
Yeah.
I may be able to, well, you know what? I won't do that because I'm sure I'll screw it up. But it is, yeah. So it is that area that we had had about 10 kids in, I think, the last time.
Okay, thank you.
Jennifer.
So can you hear me okay?
Yes.
So the Valley View portion, I believe it was both Valley View and Southeast Street that
Yeah.
were in question, and they are currently districted to Crocker Farm. No, yes, no,
No,
they're
they would've-
currently districted to Fort River.
Right, and they would get, and now they would be transitioned into Crocker Farm.
Walker.
So, so they, okay, I'm stepping back. The boundaries that you're showing us, the peach and the purple, are those different from what we saw last month?
They are slightly different, yes, different in particularly in and around this area,
Station Road.
that area, and this is actually, these were are now, these are in Crocker Farm now. They were in there previously, but we did have some kids still transitioning out.
Got it, got it. I get the islands,
Yeah.
but
And then this
I-
part is the same up here, actually. Yeah. With the-
I didn't see where you were pointing.
oh, I'm sorry, up in the northern part of what was
Yeah.
previously Crocker.
So I'm sorry, I'm struggling to understand. You mentioned the Valley View families that they're not going to have to change schools, but you're saying that they are currently districted to Crocker.
Oh, yeah, no, I'm sorry. If I did, I misspoke. It's not that they're not going to have to change. It's that we changed them from where we were the last time. And that may have been my misstatement.
We changed them from where, so sorry, walk me
Yeah.
through this again. Currently, the Valley View families are districted to Crocker Farm? No, I'm
No,
sorry, my brain, they're currently districted to Fort River.
Fort River, correct.
And previously, they were going to be moved to Crocker Farm.
Previously, they were not going to be moved. Previously, they were carved out.
Carved out, what is
Yeah.
carved out?
So they followed the existing Fort River boundary. I'm going to see if I can find a picture of it.
I don't think that's right. I think those were the families that we were concerned had to change schools.
Yeah, we have them. Yeah, we did actually, no, we did have them in Crocker Farm. Right. I'm sorry. Yeah, we did.
And they're still moving to Crocker
Yeah,
Farm.
they're still moving to Crocker Farm.
So there's no change there between
There's
this.
no change for them. No, where we did change the boundary is to go to the other side of the street. We had brought the boundary down.
The other
so
side
it's
of which
cleaner.
street?
This street here, I think this is
Southeast Street.
Main, Southeast Street right here, right? I think before we had, I'm going to see if I can clear
Oh,
this.
no.
I don't see how the peach and purple that we're looking at today is any different from what we saw last time.
So they are, at the detailed level. Yeah. And I certainly can understand that. Let me see.
Oh, you know what? Maybe I am seeing it now. I see. So the Southeast Street is the boundary.
Correct. Yeah.
And so there were some students on the east side of Southeast Street.
Yeah. And it's not a ton. It wasn't a lot, but it is now so that the boundary is cleaner.
Okay.
So it's not a lot. We didn't end up actually moving tremendous number of kids because when we started to go to the density areas up here that were north of this is where we ended up having more problems from the perspective of creating imbalances in the schools.
Okay. And that Amity Street area, I'm calling it the Amity Street that you've circled up there,
Yes.
that
Oh, yeah,
hasn't changed. That hasn't changed from the last version. Is that right?
No. Right. We had looked at
No.
going up towards Belchertown here. I think this
Yeah.
is Belchertown.
Yeah.
But again, we just couldn't do it without some shifts in population.
So when you say no, you mean no, it has not changed.
No, it has not changed. Correct.
Okay,
Yes.
so the only change is the boundary, the Southeast Street is now the boundary. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Certainly. Good job.
Yes, thanks. So, the last time our district went through this, there were so many conversations about having balances that would create equity. And I feel like you're hinting at it when you say, oh, that led to some demographics that we didn't like as much or whatever.
Mhm.
However you're saying it, which sounds very like of the moment. So I get that. But I think that this school committee, well, I'm at least speaking for myself, I'd like to know what for the students that we're putting in the different schools for next year, what does that look like in terms of our high needs students? What's the percentages? What does it look like for our IEPs and other demographics?
Sure.
Before we bring that to the vote. And the second question I had is like, with the school within the school, and this might be a question more for Dr. Z, so I'm glad she raised her hand, which is how did that piece impact class sizes, and how does it interact with the other class sizes that you have in your projections?
Tim, I was raising my hand just to let Bridget know, and then I'll let Tim answer because when we originally started this work, a part of his projections in terms of class sizes also includes all specialized programs, Bridget. So we did talk to him about coming onto this as well and the dual language and everything else. So he can explain how that took part. But in his presentation, one of the things that us as a leadership team wanted to make sure we took into account was the social emotional wellness of our students, but our program. So if as the presentation continues, he actually talks about the demographic breakdown, students with IEPs and percentages throughout the schools, because we wanted to bring that forward in the discussion, not just about balancing numbers, but also looking at the programmatic balancing as educators and with the boundaries. So as we move through, he has the slides there, and I just wanted to point that out to you. And he can talk about how he took into account coming onto us in the capacity and functional, because that was a part of our discussion.
Yeah.
Perfect. I should peek ahead because that's the second time I asked a question that's coming up later.
Yeah, well, and I think it's a good point, and it actually is one of the things that we are continuing to work on. Right, we're going to get another update of program assignments actually on Monday to just continue to kind of refine where we are here, because we have some program counts, but again, our program counts didn't necessarily align exactly with the day we got the student file. So we're going to match them up again as we go forward. And if there are any significant changes as a consequence of that, obviously we'll let you know. We don't think there will be, but again, what we have, the guidance around where the way this has worked is program placements were designated into the new school. We've taken that, we have there are rooms provided for that. Kids are assigned to programs, and so we will see if there are any changes in the counts as a consequence of that. But the new school has the programmatic designations, particularly around self-contained programs, and we have PK assigned to Crocker Farm as it currently is. So those designations that have all been established have been used to align the counts by school for the kids, and we'll see in a minute here what that means in some of those sort of demographic characteristics. Deb.
Sorry, can you explain a little bit more how PK is built into the modeling? Because I didn't realize that there were those kinds of projections.
Yeah, so we have projections out for PK that are included. We also have from what was given to us an allowance, so to speak, for a number of rooms for the PK program within Crocker Farm. So the 17 rooms that you see us talking about here do not include a set aside for 6 rooms for PK. Now we've been having conversations with everybody around whether that's the appropriate number or not, but that's the number that we have to go on right now. So we will continue to work with folks as we start to hone that down. But we are incorporating a designation of 6 available rooms for PK services in Crocker Farm as part of this whole process.
Then my follow-up, I think, is more for Dr. Z, because we had a presentation from Elizabeth Burns that gave us some insight that we would be expanding our pre-K program coming forward. Those projections are built into this this work here. Is that correct?
So that's the conversation that Tim said that we've been having around the different specialized programs and including the number of classrooms for pre-K. We actually have a meeting coming up to kind of delve further into that, because one of the things we talked about in our last meeting was what the regulations provide and to meet the needs of the students that we have and that we're projected to have. That currently, I think our projections have about 6 to 7 classrooms. I believe there's about 8 classrooms that may be like needed. So that would buck up on our functional capacity for K5 at Cracker Farm. But we are going to have a deeper conversation with the whole team around that when we talk about specialized programs.
Thank you.
And one of the things that certainly we can think about as we get actually a little bit deeper into things is just you'll see the count of available rooms under the different class size target scenarios, and those rooms, from my perspective, are not designated for anything. So how you choose to use them, if the projections work out, which the way they do, and the class size targets stay the way they are. There is some capacity at each of the schools to do something else with, whether we need an additional room here or there. There will be some capacity to do those things. Those designations, though, I have not incorporated. We have just identified them as available space. Okay. Just quickly looking at one of the things that we had talked about the last time. Here, this was just sort of content area around when we started to go in and actually look at this space and how many students were affected. It's just so that everybody is aware that we went in and tried to look at these two areas in particular, again, because we know why from our meeting the last time, why they were the way they were, and have tried to not have, and have not actually continued this practice of having these on a go-forward basis. Sarah.
I think my would you repeat that? Because my question was this is where kids go now from this area, but where have you put them for the
We have put them
future?
in Clocker Farm. We have kept them in that home boundary.
Oh, I thought you said earlier you put them in the new school.
No. These students have are staying in Crocker Farm.
And why?
Well, we have the capacity for them, was the first thing that we were looking at. The second thing is that means we don't have to transport them. So when we look at that, and when we incorporate them in and we look at the demographic breakdowns and so forth, there was nothing that is that at least looked to us to be of such a difference that that we needed to carve out any particular area anywhere in the district actually to be able to accommodate that.
So are you saying that this group of children is not significantly less white than the?
No, I'm not saying anything like that. What I'm saying is that when I look at the aggregate demographics in the school, which you'll see here in the slides going forward, the inclusion of these students in Crocker Farm doesn't make it such that there are from different characteristics, anything that, at least from our perspective, means we should start thinking about pulling out particular areas to rebalance anywhere.
Well, have you tried it both ways? Because I know we'll get to the slide that maybe some of us are concerned about, which shows the new school quite a bit whiter than Crocker Farm.
We can certainly, we know what the current situations are, right? If we look at the two in the aggregate, right? So if we look at these students are currently enrolled in Fort River and in Wildwood. And if we aggregate Fort River and Wildwood and look at it relative to where we are, the two schools combined plus Crocker Farm, we can talk about what those differences are and whether they are substantially different than the than the proposed boundaries.
I'm wondering if, especially as I look at the time and everything, I'm wondering if we can get to the part with the demographics, because a lot of the conversations, and I want to say that questions are around the demographics. I want to say that because the team, specifically the leadership team, as we were meeting with Tim, we were very clear about the balancing of the demographics, and the administrators who are here, the principals who are here, including Mr. Shea and other administrators, spoke specifically of how the islands got created and what how they were actually created. I think that if we actually look at some of the other demographics that would come forth from this new layout, it may answer some of the questions and it may help to clear up some concerns. We may have additional questions, but I do kind of want to ask that if we could just get to those parts, because I think that they're very critical to what we're being asked at this time.
Okay, yeah.
I'm
happy.
going to suggest that we hold all questions till the end of the presentation, and then I'll call on people at the end of the presentation. Thank you.
Very well. So just to get there, I mean, you all have this available. This is just a representation of the students in transition from school to school. 110 students total. So when we look at the boundary breakdown under the proposed boundary for Crocker Farm, one of the things, so this is the boundary breakdown, and when we compare it to existing Crocker Farm students, the transitions are currently Crocker Farm has 48% of students that are identified as white. It has 16% that are identified as Black or African American. It has 13% that are Hispanic or Latino. Multiracial is 12, and Asian is 10. So our two transitions are approximately 4% difference. And it's reduced on the white side from the individuals identifying as white. It's approximately 4% higher in the category that is identified as Black or African American, and it's 1% in Hispanic or Latino and multiracial. So it is that's the difference for that boundary as it exists right now. And when we look at the new school, again, here's the boundary, the breakdown of the new boundary. And if we combine the current status at both Fort River and at Wildwood, the current population that identifies as white is 47%. The current population that identifies as Asian is 14%. Black or African American is 13%. Hispanic or Latino is 17%. Multiracial is 8%, and American Indian and Native Hawaiian are both less than 1%. So again, what we see is an approximate difference of about 4%. This time it's 4% higher from individuals who identify as white. It's 3% lower for individuals who identify as Black or African American, and 3% lower for Hispanic or Latino, and 2% lower for multiracial. So we do have some slight differences between the two, but their relative difference from where they are right now is actually pretty consistent. It's about 3%, 3 or 4% currently. And then now we have the primary difference, I think, as was pointed out, is we do have about a 7% difference in the population of individuals who identify as white, and about a 10% difference in the population of individuals identifying as Black or African American. So that's the sort of the ethnic breakdown as it exists. When we look at some of the other characteristics, the differences between the two schools are actually much narrower as well. When we look at students, these are just students identified as having an IEP, right? So this might be self-contained programs, it might be mainstream students, but from the broadest possible perspective of thinking about it, students with an IEP, roughly 25 and 27% between the two schools. The populations that we have now are 26% at Crocker Farm and 29% at the new school. So again, they are in the ballpark of where the current schools are aligned. And what we have specifically programmatically, one of the things that we know is the programs have been assigned to the new school. So that is something that we'll provide a breakdown on as well. If there's some desire to have that as part of a follow-up, we can certainly do that. In addition, one of the characteristics that we also captured was students that have limited proficiency in English. In this, the two schools are exactly the same. They are within hundredths of a point in terms of the counts. When we look at it from an existing school perspective, again, they're also pretty similar, where we're 16% at Crocker right now, and rounding, we're at 16% at the combined Fort River and Wildwood as well. So from a characteristics of limited English proficiency, that assignment perspective, we're very consistent with the way schools are laid out currently. And finally, from a free and reduced lunch perspective, what we have between the two is, just starting at the top, we have between free and reduced total, we have 37% at Crocker Farm and 36% at the new school. And again, some of it is, we get there a little bit differently, right? We have slightly more students who are identified as available for free than we do at Crocker Farm, but in the aggregate, the totals are pretty similar. And when we look at the existing values, what we have at the combined schools would be approximately 40% for the new school, so the combined Fort River and Wildwood, and 32% at Crocker Farm. So 29 and 3, 29% free and 3% reduced at Crocker Farm, and at the combined schools, we have 30% who are in the 38% who are in the free, and 2% who are in the reduced. So again, they track from an availability perspective, where we have a slight reduction in the combined new school and a slight increase in Crocker Farm, but both of them, when we look at above a 35% threshold, they are both above that 35% threshold. So that, and when we look at the PAIDs are almost exactly the same. So that, and then as we continue to look at other sort of defining characteristics between the two, this is where we come to the class size component of it that I mentioned earlier.
I'm sorry,
Yeah.
I'm just going to interrupt you for a second. I know I said no questions. I just wanted to say that if anyone's watching this on YouTube or on Amherst Media and was unable to join the Google Meet, that's because there was a character missing in the URL on Board Docs, but I have fixed it. So if you want to join on Google Meet, you can just try you might need to try the URL that's on Board Docs again. But if you're watching in this on Amherst Media or on YouTube, then you may not need to because you're already watching. I just wanted to say that. Thank you.
Yep. No, of course. So again, so this is where we'll transition to just talking about the facilities themselves. When we look at the revisions around the availability of rooms, again, we're assuming our 17 to 20 from a class size perspective, again, broken over different grades and using the revised projected numbers. What we see is that we end up with an availability, a need for 16 rooms at Crocker Farm and a need for 25 rooms at the new school, which gives us one available gen ed classroom at Crocker Farm and 5 at the new school. Just the note on the bottom, I think, and we've talked about this already, but it is, this does not include the 6 designated rooms at Crocker Farms for preschool. It also doesn't include any designated rooms for programs at the new school, right? So this is a general ed analysis only. So using this number of rooms based on those class sizes, what we have, one of the things obviously that we have paid attention to is to look at differences around average class size, average general ed class size, both within a school, so intra-school and inter-school. And we do see there's some differences. Again, a lot of this is based on the fact that we have some imbalances grade to grade in terms of the number of students who are projected out. And so we do see, like, for example, in the fourth grade at the new school, we've got a bubble of enrollment there. And so as a consequence, we just have some additional students in the average class size. However, we don't ever actually hit the target of 20 in any of the rooms. So it stays below the target, but certainly in some instances it actually stays pretty well below the target. But the closest we get is in that fourth grade section at the new school. And so when we look, and again, part of this is just ensuring that what we don't have is any sort of really specific peaks or really specific valleys in terms of that target set of class sizes. Now, one of the things that we spoke about when we were thinking about both target class sizes and what that implication was using a range and trying to understand from a sort of sensitivity perspective what the impact of a lower end value or a higher end value from a target standpoint might be. So what we have reviewed in the last two slides is both the room availability requirement and the average class sizes under what we've characterized as the lower end value. So where we're assuming a maximum of 20. We had another assessment that we were doing where we had assumed slightly higher values, where the class sizes went from 17, instead of 17 to 20, they went from 21 to 24. And not surprisingly, right, if we assume more students into a class in the same number of classes, it's not unexpected that what we would end up with is some additional space being created. That's what we end up being able to show here, where we have a requirement for 13 rooms at Crocker Farm and a requirement for 22 rooms at the new school. Again, using the same base count of students, which, just given the math, right, with 17 rooms available gives us a surplus of 4 rooms, and with 30 rooms available gives us a surplus of 8 at the new school, right? So because of the lower enrollment projections, under the larger class size values, we end up, obviously, not surprisingly, with some additional rooms to be able to use. And once again, this doesn't include any designation around PK or specialized classes. When we look at average class size, same kind of an analysis. We do see some of the same peaks and valleys that we saw previously, both inter and intra-school. This is another example where in no instance do we actually get to the peak class size of 24. The bubble is a little bit different because of the way that the counts work, where now our closest size to that value is actually in the 5th grade at Crocker Farm. It is a rounding error down from 24. It's 23 and less than 0.5 from an average perspective. But at no time do we get above 24. And once that 5th grade spike that's included in there now passes, we actually don't get much above 21 in any of the average class sizes. So that's a fairly quick tour through this, trying, again, I appreciate the heads up on the time to be sort of aware of that. And so I think to the chair, if we want to open for questions, I'm happy to try to go back to any one particular slide that we need to address those.
Thank you. Sarah, go ahead.
Yeah, 2 questions, if I may, but maybe not. The pie charts about the demographics or bar charts, whatever. Did those include, I just want to be very sure, include the all the children in the Cominantes program, no matter where they live, or is it only the students in the boundaries, in the zone boundaries?
It includes the students from the boundary to which they would be assigned.
So it doesn't include, so for example, the new school demographics racially doesn't adjust for the students who are actually enrolled in Caminantes. And that might,
If they are assigned, yeah, with Comandantes being assigned to the new school, that's where they would be assigned. So it's their school of destination, I guess. I'm trying to think of how to clarify what I can tell is sort of a confusing.
it's not only where they live, or if they're assigned to a program that trumps where they live.
Correct. That's a much
Correct.
simpler way to put it. Yeah.
Yeah, I was gonna
They're
jump in
assigned-
and say that, Sarah. So
Yeah.
go ahead.
If they are assigned to a program, so for example, if they are, that is a much simpler way to put it. If they are assigned to a program, they are included in that school's characteristics.
Okay. The second one, if I may, Jennifer, is about the average, like this slide we're looking at right now, says average. So I assume that's over all the classrooms in a grade, but for what year or years? Is this the max, like which years?
This would be first year. I mean, we can look at this for max years and so forth, and we did a little bit of that the last time, but this would be first year. And we will provide as part of the final reporting on this, these values for all years, for both schools, for all years of the projections. It will be for the first 5 years. We won't do it out to the 10.
Okay.
But for the first 5 years, we will provide an indication not only of the number of sections required, but also of the average class sizes for those sections by grade, by school.
Thank you.
Bridget?
Yeah, so I have 3 questions, but the first 2 I think are really easy. The slide with students with IEPs, is that without the pre-K included?
Yes, I'm sorry, that's K-5 only.
Okay,
Mhm.
super. And then honestly, you did a great job balancing it out, it looks like to me. And then how do the class sizes get affected? Maybe this is what Sarah was asking too with Comandantes. Like, how does that get figured into all of this? Because some of those class sizes maybe are a little fixed.
So
Dr.
can I?
Zubik, wanna answer that?
Yeah. So remember in the original approved plan, it was laid out that 2 classrooms would be used for Caminantes. So we gave Tim that information when he started to lay out those things. So
Okay.
I believe, and Tim, correct me if I'm wrong, where the adjustments come in is in the non-Caminantes, in the classrooms that are not in the Caminantes programs. So regardless of whatever it is, currently, the current plan lays out 2 classrooms for Caminantes K-5. So the adjustments would happen in the classrooms that are not in the dual language program.
That's what I'm trying to get at. Are the numbers significant that it makes those other classrooms bump outside of the range or be significantly bigger?
So one of the things Tim said is that we're going to get him the finalized projected numbers for the upcoming year. Because so, for example, this year, I believe there's about 229 students, 200 plus students in Caminantes. We're going to be giving him what the estimated numbers would be for the next year, so he could adjust his projections for us.
Okay, super. And my last question is a little out there, but I'm going to say it because I was in another forum and I'm hearing from a lot of people. What is the timeline for all this work you've been doing? Obviously, it's a tremendous amount of work. And what if something was added into it, like another grade or something like that? What would your timelines look like for that kind of work?
It's a little bit hard for me to speculate, but the addition of another grade is a sort of notable change in all of the inputs. So it's not a day, it's a lot closer to like weeks than it is days, I think, to be able to incorporate that.
Thanks for letting me know.
Mhm.
Any other questions? Sarah?
Just a little one, maybe. I think I guess it was with this corresponding chart, but with the smaller class size range, there was only one extra classroom at Crocker Farm.
Yeah.
But again, there's talk, no certainty, but talk about expanding the preschool. So if that were going to happen, then there'd be no more than one, they could take no more than one room out of the gen ed.
Correct.
Okay. And then if students started returning to our public schools, why is Dr. Z shaking her head? Then we, it looks like there's room, we could still fit them into the gen ed classrooms.
So I think there's just, and I'll revisit this. We talked a little bit about this, I think, the last time, about how we think about sort of horizontal and vertical capacity, right? So if students, and I'm going to make an effort to simplify this. I don't know if that's going to work or not, but let's assume for a second that here in the kindergarten, we had 3 sections of 19 students, right? And that's sort of how we got to that average. If we had 3 kindergarten students move in, they could all fit into the existing classrooms without ever going above the target value, right? So that's our first buffer for students who are choosing to come back in. Only when we get at some level above that target class size do we start to think about sort of the horizontal expansion, which is the addition of another section, which is the requirement for another room. So the absorption of additional students is highly dependent on what is the difference between, and this is one of the reasons why we show the value, what is the difference between the average class size and the target class size? And then what is the availability of additional rooms? So it's multifactorial in terms of how you would figure out how to try to deal with it.
Thank you, Tim. I wanted to say that and say, so in an ideal setting, Sarah, we might start off on the lower end, but because again, we're a public school system, we have a very different type of population where students move in. Through as the school year starts to progress, we will slowly end up on the higher end, which it looks really great in the beginning because you see the classrooms, but again, we have to create additional sections, move individuals into rooms. So it's what I've been looking at, and the team, we've been really talking about functional capacity. How do we best function with the space that we have, with the trends that we have seen, and most importantly, with the trends that we have been experiencing for me in the past 2 years, in terms of individuals and the height points and turnarounds, in terms of increasing our student population and wanting to make sure we have adequate spaces. And the thought process that we continue to discuss is the 2 schools that consistently throughout the year have an increase in population are now going to be combined into a new school. So it may start off at 17, but they will hit that 21 range, the 24 range, because of the historical trends of Fort River and Wildwood in the past.
Thank you, Dr. Z. Any other questions from committee members? Deb, go ahead.
Hi, I'm trying to figure out what I'm start from the beginning. I think I saw from one of the slides the total enrollment that we're projecting for Crocker Farm is 292, and for the new school 520. Is that correct?
Those are the capacity values. Is that? I think.
I don't know. I saw when you did the
Yeah.
breakdown of the IEPs. I think it had the number of
Right.
students.
Yeah,
And
exactly.
I just
Yeah,
thought,
those are the counts. Correct. Yeah. Yes. Yep.
so I'm just, I mean, percentages of the whole is one thing, and number of students is another. And I have this challenge when I'm looking at budgets too. So I'm just looking at how that breaks down in terms of like what percentage of the overall population of the subcategories goes in each school. I guess that doesn't make that sense. Never mind. Skip it.
Okay. Any other questions? So I heard some requests for more information from Tim. I didn't hear any concerns about the new boundaries, although maybe that's tied up in some of the follow-up questions. In terms of next steps, so first I want to start by repeating what was something that was said at our Tuesday meeting, which is that Dr. Z can correct me if I'm wrong or if I say this wrong. Students who are targeted for switching schools when these new boundaries are implemented, those students will have the option to stay in their current school. They'll have the option to be carried over and stay in their current school. They'll have that option, and siblings of those students will be handled on a case by case basis. Did I say that right, Dr. Z?
Correct. So we're calling them established students.
Mhm.
And so there are considerations that we are going to work into, but we will contact those established students. One of the considerations is transportation and different things in terms of getting to your school. But we will provide the option with a breakdown of what that option entails in remaining in their established schools. We're not using grandfathered, it's established students. And in
Okay.
terms of their siblings, those will be handled on case by case basis.
Great, thank you. So in terms of next steps for the boundaries, am I correct that we will need to, you will want us to vote at our next meeting on approving the new boundaries? Dr. Z?
Well, that was our hope because that would have, in terms of planning, communication, and all of those things, we would need to be able to inform parents timely. And so I think it would also help the community to know where their child may or may not possibly be slated to go to school next year.
Okay,
So that is the goal for the next meeting that this be voted on.
okay, thank you. Sarah, did you have a question?
Yeah, I'm so glad you mentioned this because I missed my own note. So have you done the analysis of classroom usage, gen ed classroom usage, assuming that all the established students, excuse me, assuming all established students want to continue at whatever was closest to their, their original school? Because it looks like from one of your slides that a total of,
It's a total of 110.
yeah, but 77 of them could want to stay at Crocker Farm, which is a lot of students. So have you analyzed the usage if they all want to stay?
I have not yet, actually. This, based on some of the feedback from the other day after Tuesday, it's one of the things that we're looking at. But we will look at two things. We will look at the total, and then we will look at the duration. So it's a shorter problem if 73 of those 77 are fifth graders, which it's not, but like if just for the sake of argument, and it's a different problem if 73 of them are kindergartners. So
It doesn't look like more than a classroom.
no, right. And again, it's one of the things to consider when we think about these in the aggregate is it's X number of students spread out over Y number of grades. And we have existing capacity within the class size targets. So in the scheme of things, it might be moot in terms of like its overall impact on, a threshold capacity kind of a value question.
Thank you. Deb?
So I'm still trying to like make a more of a same size argument. So it looks to me like the population of the new school is about 1.8 times, this 1.78 times the population of Crocker in the new scenario. And then just looking at the students and how this bigger Crocker farm, Crocker mega Crocker, or whatever you want to call it, not mega, Crocker big would look. The racial breakdown in terms of Black students is striking. So I don't know what I'm doing wrong with my math, or if I am doing something wrong with my math, but from the new school, we have Black African American students 10%, which is 52 students. And then in the new school, it's 20% of, no, I did it wrong. It's 52 students in the new school. And in the bigger Crocker, it's 103. So I don't know what I'm doing wrong, but that is really, everything else is more or less the same. The Asian students are a little different. And I don't know if I'm
In
explaining.
in the newer Crocker, it would be 20% of 280, which is 56.
I had 292,
Oh, okay, so 58.
58, and then I multiplied that by 1.78.
Yeah, but you couldn't get 1.78 in there because there's not capacity. So I don't think
I'm
it's
just trying to imagine what the demographics of Crocker look like if we just put them in the new school. I'm creating a kind of parity, not by
I don't know that it's well, it's appropriate to do whatever you'd like to do. I don't know that it's a feasible thing that we could ever do.
Percentages, it's twice as much. The Black or African American population is 20% compared to 10%.
But the count of students is actually pretty similar in the middle 50s.
Okay, so can we look at slides 9 and 10? Maybe I'm misunderstanding what I'm seeing. So we have, that's the new Crocker farm or the old Crocker farm?
This is the new.
Okay, and then can we look at 10?
So if
Slide 10?
so there are approximately 1.8 times more students in
Right.
in the new school, and there's approximately half the number of individuals identified as Black or African American. But if you look at the counts, because of the base that you're multiplying by, they're approximately the same number of students. Because 20% of 290 is 58, 10% of 525 is 52.
24%.
But we still have we have twice the percentage of Black students in Crocker as we do in the new school.
Because it's half as big, or not half as big.
Yeah, but on a smaller base.
Deb, can you tell us if where are you going? Is there a question or is this a problem that you want to
It
discuss?
feels problematic to me that there's such a higher percentage of Black students in Crocker than there is in the new school.
Can you talk about why it's a problem?
Because that doesn't feel equitable use of our new facility. Where the whole town is paying for this facility, and twice, well, it's not twice as many, it's the same number of students that identify as Black or African American are in each school, but one school is much larger.
Okay, I see hands up. I saw Irv's hand up earlier and now he's at number 3, but I'm just going to let Irv go because I think you put your hand down and then put it back up again. Go ahead, Irv.
I think what Deb is getting at has some merit, and that is the percentage of African Americans at Crocker Farm is going to be overrepresented in some way. And then if you add the Hispanic or Latino population in there, you have a percentage of people of color that are certainly overrepresented in Crocker Farm. In other words, look at it and look at it in terms of hey, if you walk into that school after it's open, what one would conclude is that this is a school that is predominantly one of people of color. That's what those numbers are saying to me.
Okay, thank you, Irv. Dr. Z?
I wanted to give and maybe Sarah could go because I think Sarah was saying the same thing I was saying. Percentages are based on the total. And so I feel like there was a balance in terms of what Tim said, and I wanted Tim to repeat how he took the time to make sure that the demographics actually balanced and was within less than a 5% weather range for the majority of the demographic balance. He went through and he talked about, and I don't know if it's because the previous breakdown isn't present, that it's actually, Tim, if I'm correct, you had originally said, and it was on my notes, that for Cracker Farm, or even less since the new school is up, for the new school, it was previously 14% or 13% Black or African American students between Wildwood and Fort River, correct? Can you repeat those
Sure.
numbers?
Sure. African American students were 13%, Hispanic or Latino were 17%, and multiracial was 8% for a total of 38%.
Okay,
And currently, if you sum these up, it's 34%.
okay. So I'm trying, I just need from my understanding, as we work to balance the district, to be clear on what is the concern, because again, as Tim goes back to work it, I'm hearing questions, but I think what best helps us is to hear what the primary concern is as we try to educate the students and provide a balance within the district. And Sarah, I know you had your hand up.
Yeah, this is what I mentioned earlier. The new school is much wider. And I know the differences, the changes have been small, but they've been in the direction of a wider new school and a less white Crocker Farm. So my question is, because I don't have a fine enough understanding of where different people live in town, is there some reasonable tweak to the boundaries that could better balance the racial pie chart?
So I'm wondering if, and I'm wondering if Tim, that specific feedback, we could go back to the table and see what we would have to do to adjust the boundaries to provide that. I wouldn't want it to be a yes or no, but I also feel like a lot of the conversation happened where we were trying to avoid the creation of islands again. We were trying to adequately balance not just racial demographics, but also programming and instruction in the district. So there's some fine tuning that's occurring. And so for me, it would be for the school committee to outline what is the priority in the balancing act. Is the priority going, because I've heard as superintendent, well, I'm concerned about the instructional programs, which I am too. And we are also concerned about our demographics. So for us, the direction that I would like to have is, what is the school committee's priority in the boundaries, so that Tim can take that information as we finalize it before the next vote.
Can I follow up then on my question, or what I
Go ahead.
wondered? Is so without creating islands, if by that we mean a neighborhood that those kids need to be transported out of what would be their zone to the other school, I hope not to do that. So with that off, if that's off the table, is there any adjustment to the geographic boundaries that can provide better balance? Maybe the answer is no, but I would just like to know.
Thank you, Sarah. Deb, and then I'm calling on myself, and then Irv.
So my priorities are balancing racial demographics and free and reduced lunch or any kind of sign of low income before a population boundaries. I'm not a fan of a population islands. I'm sorry, not population islands, just islands. I'm not a fan of them, but I think they're more important. It's more important to balance the racial balance of the schools than it is to avoid the population islands. And I just want to say, from pure numbers point of view, there are more African American Black students by this projection in Crocker than they're slightly more than they are in the new school, even though the new school is larger. So that's just not going to work from my point of view. Thank you.
Okay, I'm calling on myself next, and then Irv. I have the opposite um, position from Deb in terms of the islands. I think it's really important not to have islands. I think the islands that were created within the Crocker Farm District last time, those two little islands are two apartment complexes on East Hadley Road. And it feels a little bit like those students, those, I think, mostly low income families, and the students from there were um, um, were the burden was on them to be removed from the district where their homes are districted to not go to the same school as their neighbors across the way. Like there's three apartment complexes, and this only affected two of them. I feel like the district and the school committee at the time used those students to create a balance that the school committee wants, and I am very strongly against doing that this time. I don't think we should create islands so that the school committee can have the racial balance that we want. I'm open to seeing if the boundaries can be shifted to if the school committee feels like a racial, like having a similar number of white students or a similar number of Black students in the two schools is important. But I'm against islands, and but I don't really know where people live either in town in terms of demographics, but I imagine that's going to be difficult to shift with boundaries. I I don't know how I feel about having similar slices of the pie in the two schools. I don't know how important I think that is. And I would like to get input from the community, not just from the five people here, on how important that is. When my daughter was in Crocker Farm and I would go volunteer in the classroom, I would look around and be like, wow, half the kids are kids of color. It's beautiful. I love it. It's wonderful. And she had a wonderful experience in Crocker Farm. And that's going to be similar to the new school. Like half the kids are white and half the kids are kids of color. And Crocker Farm is going to be a little bit more kids of color, like 6 points more, 7 points more. So I don't know. I don't know how I feel about it. I'm a little uncomfortable right now saying I want the slices of the pie to be equal. I'm gonna want to think about that because this is the first time we've seen this data. We didn't get to see it last time. I'm gonna want to think about that and do some community outreach about how important that is to the community. I see Irv, and then Bridget, and then Sarah.
I guess the concern that I have a concern in terms of those kids who are kids of color, where they're coming from, i.e., if a majority of those kids are coming from the apartments, then they're at Crocker Farm, and there's no bounds. In other words, you can end up with a situation where you have a lot more white kids in the new school, and fewer Black students there or people of color, and those students who are the majority of students who are color are coming from the apartments. That is something that should not happen. That would be a disaster in relationship to this town in terms of how people will feel about this. I know it hits me the wrong way. So I think that when we do this, we must be sure that we don't have not only a racial kind of island in terms of Crocker Farm being overrepresented in terms of people of color. We also don't want a situation where the majority or a significant percentage of kids at Crocker Farm are from lower socioeconomic class and are coming from the apartments. So I would really appreciate if that was looked at very carefully. Secondly, I do agree with Jennifer. We need to have a public forum on this before we make any decisions.
Thank you, Irv. Bridget.
Well, I agree with Irv and Jennifer that public input would be will be important. I'm also against islands and I'm also for balance. So, I think that what Dr. Z asked for in terms of what to prioritize, that I don't have the great answer. I think everybody's raising important pieces of the discussion, and we're we're having the discussion. So I'm going to add two other things to that mix as we're discussing, which is just, I think that balance of IEPs so that students are really getting the least restrictive environment in that 1-to-4 ratio is like considered like to be the best standard for that, even ideally 1-to-5, but at 1-to-4, that sort of ratio. And one thing that I jumped out at, and this is just because we've been spending so much time on the SOA and the fiscal sustainability report, is that in both the schools you got 36% in terms of free and reduced lunch. And that's a good number for our district's finances. I like 36%. So I really hope we can stick with that number.
Thank you, Bridget. Sarah?
Yeah, I just want to be sure my earlier statement, well, either wasn't misunderstood or I didn't say it wrong. I'm not saying I would refuse to accept this plan. I just want to know what is possible by tweaking boundaries. I'm not saying I would accept all sorts of other that however that is accomplished would be better, because it might not be in other ways. So I'm just hoping to see what else Tim might be able to come up with.
Thank you, Sarah. Deb? You're on mute.
Jennifer, I just wanted to ask, or talked about a public forum. You talked about getting public input. I think it's really important for us to think about how we're gathering public information, because questionnaires are somewhat self-selective, and I want to be really thoughtful about gathering the public input if we are going to make this sort of decision. And I don't have a solution. I'm just saying, yeah, it's complicated.
Well, I would be happy to take any suggestions that any committee members have. You can email me on how to get public input. I'll call on Dr. Z in a second, but I just wanted to say something about apartment complexes. So yes, I agree that it would be problematic if somehow like most or all of the students whose families are renters and live in apartment complexes were like all in one school. But we have apartment complexes all over town, and we have two districts. So we have some on the East Hadley Road that are in South Amherst. We have like Colonial Village that are in the middle of Amherst and that are going to be district to the new school. So I'm less worried about the apartment complex issue. And to Bridget's point, the free and reduced lunch is very balanced between the two schools, and the percent of IEPs is very balanced between the two schools. So if they weren't, that would be more concerning to me than the racial demographics, because my sense is that the town is getting less white. So a snapshot of what the students look like now, I don't know. I'm not convinced that this is something we should push for, to have as I said, the slices of the pie be more equal between the two schools. But as I said, I'm interested in getting input from the community about that. I saw Dr. Z's hand up. Did you want to say something? And then Deb, and then Irv.
I was just saying, I had a thought process, but I was saying that basically, Jennifer, if you don't mind, we could schedule a meeting to talk about possibilities, because this public forum would include our our office. And I just want to make it quite clear that to me, the public forum for the demographics that you are speaking about will not be that you may require you as individuals to go into the community, which I am open to, but it's not going to be one where you're going to hear from the voices that you plan to impact. So it can't be the standard Google Meet. It cannot be come to the high school. It's going to require a different level of commitment from the committee to truly hear voices. So just know that everyone needs to be heard, not just the individuals who come to our meetings and give public comment.
Thank you, Dr. Z. That's an excellent point. Deb, and then Irv.
I'd like to do that more in general, not just in this context, but I lost my thought. I'm sorry. Oh yes, low income, free and can we back up a minute and define free and reduced lunch? Because with universal free lunches, people and the level of paperwork that you have to do to fill out an application for free and reduced lunch, it becomes a way of under measuring low income if that's the only metric you use. Because of the shift from universal free lunches
Dr. Z, do you have a explanation of how that's measured, the free and reduced lunch?
I'm gonna ask Tim to say how he got his numbers, because I think that would be better than me saying how it was measured.
Yeah, honestly, our numbers come from the district. There's a designation captured that identifies students as eligible, and the categorization, and it comes in the three categories that were shown, which is either the paid group or free or reduced. And so, so whatever information we're using is sourced from however the district does
And
its categorization.
So
And I believe that that's the same information that we get from the state, that helps us to identify our Title I schools as well.
I thought that because of this artifact of universal free lunch, the state was using other measures like Medicare. I thought there was a way, and I thought there was a way of expanding it to properly capture what used to be captured by free and reduced lunch, which isn't anymore. And I would like to.
So there was forms that were previously filled out, the families
Yeah.
are required, but now there are different measures. I don't want to missquote,
Okay.
so I can get that information.
That'd be great.
But yes, but I know in terms of how the state identifies who's Title I. So for example, right now Cracker Farm is not a Title I school. So those types of things, we also wanted to make sure that at the end, primarily it's balancing the students, but we looked at those factors as well.
Okay, thank you.
Irv?
I just want to make sure we understand in terms of having a public forum. I don't care whether it's in person, via the internet, etc. But we have to have a public forum, and we've been down this road before. We don't do it, and we are highly criticized for not being inclusive, for not being a committee that wants input from the general public. We must do it. That is not to do it is not an option. We have to do it. Have to have a public forum. The other thing is that perception matters in this town. It really, really matters. And I've been through enough in this town in relationship to perception, where controversies all of a sudden erupt because perceptions were ignored.
Any other questions or comments? So I'm going to say that I'm going to go on a limb and say we're probably not going to vote at this at our November meeting, but possibly at the December meeting. I will take I've taken all of your input on what our next step should be. I would be happy to take any other ideas you have about how committee members individually can go out into the community to get input from people, in addition to holding a public meeting to discuss. And I will talk with Dr. Z about the best ways to get the word out. Any final thoughts or questions before we close?
No, just thank you.
Great. Thank you so much to Tim for all of your work and investment in this. We really appreciate it. I move that we adjourn.
Second.
Second.
I got Sarah first, seconded by Sarah. Jennifer's a yes. Sarah?
Yes.
Deb? Oh, you're on mute, but I thought I saw you
Yes.
say yes. Yes. Bridget?
Yes.
And Irv.
Yes.
Thank you all.
Thank you, everyone.
Good night.